Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hey, Joe on Joe listeners, it's me, Joe Slepsky, and I'm back and you're back. This is the quarantine re-releases of our original tracks going back 4 years, and I hope you're enjoying these as much as I'm enjoying reliving them, warts and all. I think you can easily hear where I'm finding myself and finding what the show turned out to be, so I'm really happy to share these with you guys. Again, we pulled these back from behind the Patreon wall, and I wanted to make them available to everybody during this time to share and give and listen and have fun, especially because G.I. Joe's back on YouTube now. So, yeah, so I appreciate that. And you guys can always follow me at Joe on Joe Pod on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Let me know what you think of some of these early episodes, how terrible they are, or how funny they are, or how awful they are. And we're starting recording back up again, so reach out to me. Let me know, joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Let me know if you want to join me for an episode. I believe we're going to jump into G.I. Joe Extreme very, very soon. So without any further ado, here is the OG track from Joe on Joe 4 years ago. Enjoy.
You are listening to the Joe on Joe podcast, the only podcast where Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Welcome back to Joe on Joe. Thanks for listening. This is your host, Joe Slepsky. Appreciate everyone who gives us a listen and follows us on Twitter, Joe on Joe Pod, Facebook, Joe on Joe Pod, Instagram. Send me an email at joeonjoepod@gmail.com. And I am still blown away by the excitement of the previous episode, In the Cobra's Pit, which was like the Fury Road of Joe episodes. It just never stopped. We're going to kind of go a 180 on that in the Vines of Evil this week. It's not as exciting of an episode. It kind of slows things down quite a bit. Like in a not in a terrible way, because there's a couple really cool things in it. But we'll get into it and we'll discuss. But definitely a step down from In the Cobra's Pit. But here we go with the Vines of Evil, starting now.
Yo, Joe!
So, like I was saying, it's going to be hard to top the previous episode for just raw excitement. You know, you basically had a chase from start to finish of that episode, where it started there fighting in the desert, it switched to the air, and followed all the way through to the desert, where the Sky Strikers got knocked down, and they were and it was a Flint and Roadblock and Mutt and Junkyard. They were being menaced by those Vines of Evil. Meanwhile, you had the Zartan breaking the Cobra Commander out of the swamp prison, which is always fantastic, a swamp prison. And so it was a lot going on there. If you're looking for that same level of action and excitement, you're not going to get it in this episode. So first, we're starting with a recap of what happened. Basically, Duke and Snake Eyes are captured, and Cobra Commander has been captured. Before we go any further, today's file card is going to be focus is going to be on Flint. We're going to get into Flint, who is ably voiced by the amazing Bill Ratner, and I think very quickly became the lead male on G.I. Joe. Between Flint and the other character, actually, strangely, that is introduced in this episode for the first time, which we will get to it. If you know who it is, you know who I'm talking about. But Flint easily became the lead of the show, almost as if like Duke was like the formerly cool older brother, and Flint was the guy that everyone wanted to hang out with. So we open with Roadblock and Flint both getting strangled by these predatory vegetables, as Roadblock likes to call them. How great is Roadblock? Roadblock's just from the speech pattern to just everything's awesome about Roadblock. He's also kind of got a little Mr. T in him. We call him things sucker. So they see that Mutt has survived the Sky Striker crash, and he's using the engines of the Sky Striker to help fight these vines back. And if you remember from last episodes, the vines, Destro shows the vines, he just puts like a couple drops of water on them, and the vines go crazy, and they almost strangled Zartan and Cobra Commander. And it falls into that trap of I think you can use the Star Trek Next Generation Worf analogy with it, where they have to show that so Worf's the baddest dude in the world, but he's the first guy that always gets his butt kicked. And in this one, they show how dangerous these vines are. There's just one vine is so dangerous it'll kill you, and yet somehow they manage to survive a whole valley full of them, which is ridiculous. If they were that virulent with all that rain coming out, they would have been crazy, overgrown everything. So like it makes the heroes look even more heroic. Jumping forward, once again, Cobra is in charge of an arena of sport where the Joes can fight each other, and this time it's Snake Eyes and Duke, just like in the previous miniseries. They seem to have learned a couple lessons. They've figured out a way to shackle them on the ground so Duke can't run away and escape the console. They also take a big note from the movie Tron here. This platform they're fighting on, and certainly with the glowing trident and glowing sword of Star Wars Tron, but it's all very much like the disc, the platforms for the Tron discs game. And here Cobra Commander lays out his plan.
We've got to get word to Joe headquarters.
They're going to hit the Capitol and everything, and the Joes have to figure it out.
There's enough pure energy in this board to beam a message to Mars. But how do we tap into it?
The thing with Snake Eyes, since he doesn't talk,
all we need is an antenna.
You've got answer, like kind of like a call and repeat, like where one character has to say, "Oh, I know what we need," and then they intuit from the silent character, and then they have to repeat it. "Oh, you're right, Snake Eyes. We need that antenna." So Snake Eyes figures out they can use one of the antennas that's controlling their power grid to kind of amplify his little mini SOS radio that's in his belt that the Cobras forgot to take. And again, showing that Snake Eyes is amazing and the best at what he does.
It's Snake Eyes. He's using Joe Code Ultra.
He's
Next
using
target,
Joe Code
Cobra
Ultra,
Destruction,
which is
Washington.
awesome, because I want to say I want to feel like that's a special Morse code that the Joes have developed, so only Joes can read it, which I really hope is the truth. So now the Joes know where to find these guys. All right, now to our file card spotlight. We're going to talk about Flint. Flint is the warrant officer. His file name is Dashiell R. Fairborn. His primary military specialty is infantry. His secondary military specialty is a helicopter pilot, and he's from Wichita, Kansas. Flint was a Rhodes Scholar, and he earned his degree in English literature. He was bored by the groves of academia. He enlisted in the Army, and the tenacity and concentration he had used so well scholastically to grind his way through the Airborne School, Ranger School, Special Forces School, and finally Flight Warrant Officer School, graduating each with top honors. A thorough tactical planner, Flint drafted and personally led a half-dozen rescue missions in hostile territories that, for obvious reasons of security, were never publicized, let alone admitted to. So now we see that Cobra is threatening to use their weather control device, which, if you remember, is the MacGuffin. They're going to use it on Washington, D.C., so they're starting to evacuate D.C. Clutch comes in here.
Only maybe, Clutch.
It tells us that Doc, who is a medical doctor, all of a sudden has created a energy shield,
Deflect and redirect energy.
which will absorb
Like
direct
the energy transmitted
and
by
redirect
Cobra's
energy,
weather machine.
right?
Blowtorch.
All of this starts to make not a lot of sense, and they bring Blowtorch in, who's got a great costume. So Blowtorch fires his Blowtorch, which again, G.I. Joe does great firework, and you see that Doc's device kind of absorbs the energy from, and then it redirects it, and then they use it as a laser. So basically, it absorbs energy and then shoots it back at you and destroys you. This is very cool. Couple problems. Doc is a doctor. you know, I'm sure he's smarter than your average doctor. He's a soldier. I'm sure he's quite capable in all manner of things. But I guess they didn't have sci-fi yet. They didn't have the laser trooper but no, because they had Zap. Zap would have come up with something like this. It just seems a stretch. I don't see Ben Carson whipping up a laser refraction device. Let's put it that way. We'll be right back.
Now back to G.I. Joe.
But moving on from Doc's brilliance, because Doc's great, so I don't mean to rip on him. It just seems a little implausible. We're back in the pit with the Sky Striker, and these fellows, who now we know that Flint's secondary specialty is he's a helicopter pilot, so it makes total sense that he's able to kind of rig together a little mini helicopter device, kind of a whirligig, if you may, to get these guys out of the situation. And it's of course it's Flint, it's Roadblock, it's Mutt and Junkyard. Mutt and Junkyard, Mutt being the dog handler, Junkyard being the dog, who's adorable. And they're gonna fly on out of the valley. So the quote for Flint's file card is, "We had thought Cobra had us in the stinking dungeon for good, so we didn't know what was going down when we heard that chopper coming in and all the heavy hardware going off like the 4th of July. Then somebody kicked down the door to our cell, and when the smoke cleared, there was Flint with that lopsided grin saying, 'Come on, boys, we're going home.'" So that lopsided grin, what they're talking about is it's Han Solo. It's Harrison Ford. If there was anyone that was modeled to be that, it would be Flint. Very much like Indiana Jones, very much like Harrison Ford's characters at the time, which were hugely popular, of course, in the mid-'80s. So the Joes escape. They escape the ravine. Roadblock gets left behind because he gets snagged by the vines, and Mutt and Junkyard and Flint are the only ones to escape, and they're like, Roadblock basically says, "Go without me. I'll figure a way out." And he lets himself go. The same kind of bravery that would be on display in the G.I. Joe movie a couple of years later, when Roadblock is the only guy to escape with the snaked Cobra Commander. So Mutt and Flint have beaten up a couple Cobra goons and disguised themselves as Cobra, and they're heading to the nearest town, which we will soon find is named like Cobra Town. And they have like the Cobra Bar and the Cobra Pharmacy and the Cobra Haberdashery. It's pretty great. And they're talking about the Dominator, and we're about to get the quote of the show from Cobra Commander. It's going to be great. But if you see so far, not much has happened in the show. It's not boring per se.
Give me no buts. Lower the Dominator.
Fast paced, and there was the line of the show: "Give me no buts. Lower the Dominator." You know, it is what it is, right?
No, not sunlight.
So once again, we see Zartan getting attacked by the sunlight. Kind of a reminder for the toy, and here's Destro, kind of being a dick. He's laughing at a man's disability, because really that's what it is for Zartan. It's a disability, and Destro thinks it's funny. That's great. Back to the vines. We're all happy Roadblock's safe because we love Roadblock, but if those vines are as deadly as Destro was saying, he would be dead meat. He just waited until the sun came up. I'm happy he's alive, don't get me wrong, because then we get more rhymes. So now Cobra's they just fired off their Weather Dominator, and they're sending some kind of poorly drawn tornadoes to destroy Washington, D.C. And here's the part of the plan that I just cannot wrap my head around, and I don't understand. So the Joes have these energy mirrors, and Cobra's sending wind and tornadoes and stuff at them. And what exactly are the energy mirrors supposed to do? Which, again, I'm not saying Doc's not wrong, but how are energy mirrors supposed to stop against the wind of a hurricane or a tree that got uprooted and flies at you? Cobra's not blasting the city with the energy. It's just, it doesn't, this whole...
Oh
section seems ill-conceived. And now a bunch of hailstorms, giant hailstones come down from the ground, and they just start shattering the mirrors, which is going to leave a mark. Certainly had dents on my car from it, so I'm assuming these giant beach ball sized hailstones are going to do some bad bombing. But let's move beyond. Let's just say G.I. Joe knows what they're doing, and they just got to weather this storm, quite literally. So we all know Flint. He's got that great look. He wears he's got the beret, and the camo pants, and he carries the sawed-off shotgun. And we're going into break.
G.I. Joe will return after these messages. Now, back to G.I. Joe.
So if Flint just has a good look, and a good look, and voiced by the very capable Bill Ratner, it's no surprise that Flint eventually goes on to become the lead of the show. And in the meantime, we got Flint and Mutt with Junkyard on their side, walking through, and they reach the Cobra Cafe, which is straight out of Casablanca. It's a rundown dive, desert town bar just full of scumbags, and looks like dreadnought cast-offs. Like it's the cantina from Star Wars, really, but with humans. And there's a Cobra soldier on piano, which is really great, and a bunch of goons with a rodent-looking dog, really ugly dog with green eyes. And they do what thugs are supposed to do. They threaten to, beat up the completely brand new strangers in town, which means there's a lot of dudes there. Did they all get this treatment when they first came in? Because at one point everyone was a stranger. So did everyone that came into this bar have to get beaten up in order to just sit down and have a nice cold beer, Cobra or not? So a fight breaks out. It was very quick. Mutt punches a dude that looks like the sailor from The Punisher, and there's a dreadnought-looking guy with pink hair. And the whole time, there's a gentleman, don't shoot the piano player, sitting in the corner, reading a paper, kind of blithely unaware of what's going on. And we get a glimpse of who he is. Now, if you know the toys, you know who he is. But if on the show, you're like, who's this intriguing gentleman? And we're about to find out. Oh, but before that, we get Mutt scaring a dog away with growling at him, which is dynamite. And here we go. First introduction to one of the greatest Joes of all time.
You, don't live around here, do you? Don't be so nervous. I'm not with Cobra.
Then who are you with?
I'm with myself and anybody who can pay my price. The name's Shipwreck.
Yeah.
Why would that interest us?
Because you like dudes named after shipwrecks.
Cobra's Sweetheart Parade.
That's why.
Now, you
Flint.
pay my fee and
Shipwreck's
get out of
great.
here?
Shipwreck
Or
is.
hang around and pray for Urban
He's
renewal?
also got a Han Solo thing going on, except with the voice stylings of Jack Nicholson. He sounds like Jack Nicholson, too cool for the room, and he's a mercenary, so he'll do. He's essentially the anti Zartan, where he's a bit of a mercenary. It sounds like he was in, and well, we're not doing his file card, but we'll get to him. But I think he was in like the Merchant Marines or something, and he's just gonna, he's gonna mercenary around. So if you can have Zartan, we can have Shipwreck. We haven't met Polly yet. I don't know if that's in this episode, but I cannot wait to meet Polly because he's great. Or she's great. Polly's a girl. Yeah, I think so. I think Polly's a girl. So now, back to the Weather Dominator. Destro fires a bolt, and now they start shooting lightning. So it's huge lightning storm firing on DC. Finally, the energy mirrors actually get hit by energy, and they absorb it, and then they're about to, they're going to charge up, and then they're going to fire energy back. And so this makes sense.
Roger, GH.
But
The redirection mirror is in position.
No! Redirect the energy
it makes sense for electricity, but it only makes sense for electricity. It made no sense for hail or wind. So I say to you, Cobra and Destro, Mr. Tactician, why did you change up your strategy of hitting them with tornadoes and hurricanes and light soothing showers that would just keep their underwear wet and soiled and never really get comfortable, so it would itch the whole time that they're in their cars. So Doc fires. They collect all the energy. They from their handheld mirrors, and then they collect it with Doc's mirror, and he fires it back. Of course, it behaves like energy only in G.I. Joe behaves, where it curves with the Earth. It doesn't actually hit a satellite or anything. And he shoots it, and he hits the Weather Dominator, and it's so explosive, it sends the Weather Dominator into space, breaking into 3 distinct parts. Yes, you heard me right. His energy blast turned the Weather Dominator into basically a rocket that shot into suborbital space and cleanly split into 3 pieces.
In 3 pieces.
Lady J said it the best.
Reaction of crazy weather all over the world.
Oh, now they're in trouble.
We've got to get those pieces back together, or the sun may never
That's
shine on Earth again.
That's the part that's exciting, is that now that the whole world is threatened because the Weather Dominator went nuts. So now we have some real like high stakes. We're well into the episode, so it's a little slow going for this specific episode. But now it's like, okay, I see what's going on. The whole world is in danger, and the Joes have to get it and stop it. I don't think they ever made this desert skiff for Shipwreck, because Shipwreck just pulled out a big old desert boat, and the guys jumped in it, and they're using it like wind power to travel on the desert. I don't think they ever made that. I'm fairly positive they never made that toy, but it's totally fun. It's like a weird water world, Mad Max kind of way. And so their cliffhanger is they're about to get caught in a sandstorm, which is totally tearing up this boat, and these guys are getting messed up. Mutt gets thrown off. Junkyard strangely fine on the boat. I would have figured Junkyard would have been a little more messed up, but yeah, Mutt is duned out into the dunes, and that's our cliffhanger, boys and girls. Go to commercial.
Will return after these messages. In our next episode,
We get a little teaser for what we're going to get for next episode. So, like I said, it's not a bad episode by any stretch, because you get the introduction of Shipwreck, which is great. You get Snake Eyes. You get to see Snake Eyes doing some kung fu. There's a weird imbalance between all that action of the first episode and then just a lot of nothing in this episode until the very, very end. I feel like you could have rejiggered some of the plot elements, and I don't know. I feel like this was a bit of a placeholder for them. I don't know if you agree, if you disagree. If you agree, shoot me a note, Twitter me out, tweet me out, Joe and Joe Pod, or send me a note on Facebook if you agree, or if you think I'm full of it. But either way, it's still a great show, great episode. Don't get me wrong. Very exciting. So yeah, thanks for listening. Join me next week as we get into the part 3 of the Revenge of Cobra miniseries. And this has been The Vines of Evil. And just remember, now you Joe, and Joeing's half the battle.